how Swami Rama raised us up, and each one of us shares our experiences because we have seen that only by experiences we learn, not by, not only by reading books and by hearing some consultations. And so thank you so much.
For most of us, there are two parts to our journey with Swami Rama. There's the part that knew him as a person in the body, and there's the part that continues once he has left the body. The part that is about learning to find the Guru in the core of your own mind and heart. And the time that we have with them as an embodied personality is the purpose of it is to prepare us for finding that inner journey. Let's begin, though, by just taking 2 minutes to sit together and feel the flow and the touch of the breath in your nostrils. And bring your mind into a centered and mindful place. Om. My own acquaintance with our Guru lineage happened in October of 1970. I was 19 years old at the time. And a teacher of mine, a high school teacher of mine, who was, by the way, Sophia, do you need to do any translation?
No, it's okay. We also tried yesterday. We had no problem with our translation. It's
okay. Good. So in October of 1970, the debate coach in my high school, who was a very important mentor to me, came to me and said, "Next Thursday, I'm having this Hindu priest come in to talk about meditation. I thought you might be interested." Now, I had some interest in meditation and Indian religion from my social studies classes. I remember reading about that in the book and thinking, "Oh, I need to learn something more about that someday." So clearly the day had come. So I went to this lecture, and this was my first meeting with Swami Vedabharati. Back then, his name was Usharbud Arya. He was a professor of Sanskrit and Indian religion at the university in my city. And he gave this brilliant talk about meditation, not only explaining meditation and demonstrating it, but also linking it to my own Christian tradition and explaining, even in that lecture, more things about what the spirituality of Christianity was really about than I had heard from any of my Christian teachers. So I was amazed by the mind of this man. And he announced that he was beginning some classes. So I thought, well, okay, I'm going to sign up for those, which I did. The following January, began taking classes with him in his home. We didn't yet have a meditation center here in Minneapolis. And this went on for about 6 months, and then he thought we were prepared for an initiation if we wanted to have one. And I did. So I went for my initiation. I went out that earlier that day and picked a bunch of wildflowers, which unfortunately wilted completely by the time I got to his house. It was kind of pitiful, and sat there for my meditation, having just read Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi and thinking, oh my God, the heavens are going to open up now. And he did the initiation ritual, whispered the mantra in my ear, And I was so nervous about doing everything right that I could hardly, I was hardly in a meditative state. But that's where it began. And I attended his lectures and seminars for the next couple of years as a community gradually formed here. And we created the meditation center in Minneapolis, which actually became for a while a residential ashram for people who were seriously interested in spiritual sadhana. And I was, so I joined that community. There were 16 of us living in the building. You can imagine 16 people in their early 20s. So there was all kinds of stuff that happened. Um, Two of the people in the community were former girlfriends of mine who seemed to take a great delight in torturing me at the time. A few months after I was initiated, in July of 1971, I met Swami Rama for the first time. As I said, I had listened, I had read Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi. So I was expecting when I saw Swami Rama to have something like the experience that Yogananda described finding his guru. If you remember the story, he's walking along a street in Calcutta, and all of a sudden he passes a narrow alleyway, and there's this old man in the alleyway just staring at him, and his feet stop. He tries to go forward away from that alleyway, and he can't do it. He can only go backwards. So he goes backwards towards the old man. And he realizes by the time he gets there that he is meeting his guru, touches his feet, and the rest is history. So I was expecting something like this with Swami Rama. Well, he walked into the lecture. He was a tall, commanding presence, definitely. Very regal in his bearing, but the heavens didn't open up, and he wasn't surrounded by a nimbus of light or anything like that. So I was disappointed. Um, and gradually had a number of interactions with Swami Rama since I was living in the community there over time. Um, and I mean, they were good teachings that he was giving, and I followed them as much as I could. Um, and that went on for a number of years. But of course, being a person in my early 20s, I was struggling with a lot of personal issues about establishing a career and sorting out my personal life and the rest of it. The 20s and 30s in our lives tend to be rather noisy with that kind of developmental business. And so I was with my practice most of the time. At a certain point, I needed to, go to school and finish my graduate degrees and the rest of it. And so after I left that residential community, I was kind of in and out of my uh, practice for several years as I sorted my life out. And during that time, Swami Veda was very careful about keeping his relationship with me. Even though I didn't attend a lot of lectures and seminars on a regular basis, he would call me up and say, just come to the house and sit with me for 1 hour. So I would go, mostly out of respect for him, and sit with him for an hour, which was very nice. Finally, I finished my degree my last graduate degree in 1994, a doctorate in psychology. A few years have elapsed. I am 43 years old, and my personal and professional life got sorted out. I became a psychologist. I managed to come out as a gay man and gradually find a partner. Um, on my way to my commencement for my doctoral degree, for some reason, the thought occurred in my mind to call Swami Veda in India and let him know that I would come and visit. I had not seen him or Swami Rama for 5 years at that point, and I knew that they were both ill and they might not survive. So I thought I should go and pay my respects. So I called him up. He was very happy to hear from me, and even happier yet to hear that I was coming to visit the following year. So my partner and I sat down to figure out our budget for the trip. It was about $10,000. And I thought immediately, how am I going to get $10,000? I'm not sure this is even possible to do. Later that week, a lady comes into my office for therapy, someone that I had seen on for some time at a very, very low fee. And she was personally very poor, but she came from a wealthy family. She came in that day and she said, I received an inheritance from my family, and I would like to go back and pay you the full fee for the therapy that we've done over these years. So we sat down together and figured out how much that would be. $10,000 on the nose. Unbelievable. She writes me a check for $10,000. So I came home with the money for my trip. This had actually happened before. In 1974, when I was 23, Swami Rama was taking a group of people to India for the Kumbh Mela. And I was a penniless student, so I didn't seem to have any hope of going along. Then about a week before the closure for the registrations, my mother called me and said, your grandmother has given us some money and we'd like to give each of you kids $1,000. And $1,000 was exactly the price of the trip. So that time also, some miraculous support came my way to make it possible for me to go to India for the first time, which was absolutely life-changing. On that first trip in 74, I had the opportunity to meet some of the great saints who were at that time still available to the public. Anandamayi Ma was one of them. Another was a great yogi named Deoria Baba, who at that time was thought to be about 350 years old. And he looked 350 years old. His jata, his dreadlocks, were so long. They were longer than the height of his body. And he couldn't stand up to talk to people. He would lay on this dais about 2 meters above the crowd and just kind of hang over the edge of it and talk to people. And Anandamayi Ma, oh my God, what a presence that lady had. Unbelievable. I mean, you could feel her constant samadhi in her presence. It was really remarkable. So we got the funds for our trip and we went. And on that visit to Sadhana Mandir, because Sadhaka Gram didn't exist yet at that point, I was reinitiated into some new practice by Swami Veda, which he told me was given to him by Swami Rama, and actually had an opportunity to meet with Swami Rama, and that was the usual. He had such a field of peacefulness around him that when you came into his presence, you would forget all your questions. Sometimes people even forgot their name. And so I come into his presence, all my questions go away. And I sit there thinking, oh my God, I've got to come up with some kind of a question. I might not have this opportunity again. So I keep trying to manufacture questions. And as my questions come up, he deflects them by saying, how do you like the landscaping here? How do you like the hospital? How was your trip? When did you come? Are you sick? Blah, blah, blah. Very unspiritual conversation, really. But all the while, he was watching me with those eyes. And in that visit to the ashram, I began to feel the parts of my relationship with them, both, that go beyond the life of this body. When I came in 1974, I felt that sadhana mandir was my home. And at that time, I just rationalized it away by saying, oh, you're a Sanskrit student, you're studying Sanskrit with Swami Veda. Of course, you're going to feel this way if you come to India. But when I came in 1996, 22 years later, the feeling was 5 times stronger. And I began to realize, well, perhaps this place really is my home. Maybe this river really is my mother. That's how it felt. That's the point where I really became a disciple of Swami Rama. It took me 26 years to get there. 26 years to sort of clear out all of the emotional noise in my heart that was blocking me from being able to feel the flow of the guru force in my own mind. One thing about Swami Rama, he didn't bother with people who weren't prepared. And I'm sorry to say, the whole time that I knew him in the body, he was very nice to me. That's not a good thing. Because when Swami Rama really loved somebody, he ground them into powder. He was a fiery teacher. And I did not have the strength to withstand what he had to offer until that time. So I came to him with the intention of offering myself as his disciple. And I think he accepted that intention. So it's interesting because my life with Swami Rama in the body was pretty ordinary. And I have a real sense of regret that I was not prepared for what he had to offer. He really loved Swami Veda. He was so mean to Swami Veda. Oh my God. Unbelievable. He would humiliate him in front of the other disciples all the time. One time, Swami Veda came into Swamiji's room. He was teaching a small group of disciples. And as he walked into the room, Swamiji looked over disapprovingly. And Swami Veda said, sorry to interrupt, Swamiji, I'll just sit here in the corner. I just felt a need to be close to you. So Swamiji looked at him like a gathering thunderstorm. And at the top of his lungs, he screamed, out! And Swami Veda said, sorry, Swamiji, I'll just be quiet here. I won't disturb your class. Out! So he quietly left, went down the hall to his room, sat down, went into samadhi. Whenever the guru beats you, there's a blessing at the other end. Why do they do that? Because the ego needed to be ground away, needed to be done away with. So a lot of Swami Rama's disciples to this day believe that Swami Veda was some kind of a bad disciple because Swami Rama yelled at him all the time. Well, that's not what it's about at all. He only yells at the people he loves. He only grinds the people he loves who are ready to be ground. And so when he's in the body, he has the opportunity to do that in an embodied way as a person. Outside the body, he has to be a little more clever, arranging circumstances to do the grinding for him. And so many times when initiates have trouble in their lives, it doesn't come to them right away that this might be the guru doing something. Since that time in 1996, I have only to close my eyes and I feel him looking over my shoulder. That sense of presence is there in my mind all the time. Does he speak to me all the time? No, not at all. He preferred to teach in silence when he could. He would, a lot of times he would yell at Swami Veda and say, "I've been calling you all day. How come you haven't responded?" And Swami Veda would be very confused because the phone was not ringing, you know. He didn't hear him call verbally. Sometimes he would even go to his wife, Mrs. Arya, and say, "Did Swamiji call on the phone today?" And she'd say, "No." And it took a long time for him to realize that what Swami Rama was saying was, "I'm calling you in my mind, and you're not hearing me." So that's the way that they prefer to teach. At most, I might get from him one word every other year. One time I was in Lithuania, used to do a summer retreat with people in Lithuania for about 10 years. Lovely experience. If any of you ever have a chance to go on that retreat, I think Rimka has been there. It's marvelous. And Lithuania is a beautiful country. Reminds me a great deal, actually, of Minnesota, where I live. Lots of lakes and forest. And usually after the retreat is finished, our hosts would take us for a couple of days of rest and relaxation on the Baltic Sea coast, usually Ashutosh and I and some of the people from the Lithuanian group. So one time we were out on the Baltic coast and we were all sitting around and my host's wife, Davy, was making dinner. And her friends were saying, "Davy G, isn't it hard for you to cook for people when you're fasting?" Because she had a habit of keeping a fast one day a week for a long time. So she started talking about this practice that she had had for all these years and doing it in such a loving way. Now, I had thought about fasting one way or another for a long time, but never really had an opportunity to do it except on retreats. So as she's talking and giving this beautiful explanation of her practice, all of a sudden a voice comes in my right ear and says, "Okay, it's time. It's time for you to start." And so from that day, I started keeping a fast one day a week. And I've kept it up since then, except for the time when I was recovering from surgery, when it was important for me to keep reconstructing my bones that were operated on. But I still keep that fast. You know, most weeks I eat, I keep my fast from Monday evening until Wednesday breakfast, about a day and a half. And it's a lovely time to feel clear and empty and open. It's a joyful feeling, really. I seldom feel hungry, which is interesting. And when I have finished the fast, I typically have reestablished my realistic sense of hunger. And so that helps with appetite. And one of the things about doing tapas, about doing ascetic, so-called ascetic practice, which we usually think of as denying ourselves, is that that's not really what it's about. It's about learning to really enjoy. To replace an experience of pleasure eating with an experience of joy at transcendent beauty, which is either the transcendent beauty of tasting whatever food you take, or the transcendent beauty of feeling that sense of emptiness and clarity. And so if you practice that way, gradually over time, your appetite reduces slowly. And that's the same for all of the four primitive, well, Swamiji called them primitive fountains of desire. I call them primary fountains of desire because the word primitive makes them sound bad or animal somehow, and they are that, but they're necessary. They're things we have to preserve the life of our body: food, sleep, sex, self-preservation. So the first thing in relationship to your appetites is to have a balanced relationship with them. Because if we use these things too little, we start to die. You know, if you don't take food for 2 weeks, food and water for 2 weeks, your body starts to die. If you don't sleep for 72 hours, you begin to become psychotic, you know, and so on. So we need these things, but we can also overdo it. And when we overdo those pleasant experiences, it results in all kinds of chronic illness, addiction, all kinds of problems. So first, have a balanced relationship. Then, as you deepen your experience of tapas, your enjoyment of life through concentration, all those appetites gradually reduce. Naturally. You don't have to push. You don't have to force it. And most of the time, that's what we do. This is the secret of living a spiritual life, one of the most important secrets of living a spiritual life. In all the religious traditions of fasting, for example, we practice fasting by just denying ourselves food. That doesn't work. Doesn't. In the Christian tradition, for 40 days of Lent, we keep some kind of a fast, even if it's just one food. What happens on Easter morning? Pig out. During Ramadan, Muslims take neither food nor drink as long as the sun is above the horizon. When the sun goes down, party. All my Muslim friends tell me that they gain weight during Ramadan because at night they just cut loose, you know? And this is how it goes for that way of practicing tapas. If you try and practice celibacy by just not having sex, you're going to be in trouble sooner or later. It's going to happen. Look at the Roman Catholic Church. Look at the Tibetan tradition. Every spiritual tradition that tries to do this has the same result. There's some kind of sexual stuff that comes up between the practitioners and the people, the teachers and the people. And that's not okay. You learn to be celibate by enjoying your sexuality mindfully, enjoyment through concentration. And gradually in that experience, you find a pathway into something greater. And at that point, your appetite for sex just naturally begins to reduce, and you become a celibate person. Not somebody who's controlling their appetite, but somebody who doesn't have an appetite for that. I had a therapy client one time who was a musician. Whenever you make music with people, sing with them, or make instrumental music with people, you form a kind of intimate bond with them that even changes your neurochemistry significantly. People who are longtime musicians will recognize this sense of closeness that you feel when you make music with people. This guy was a popular musician, and he used to love having groups of people come over to his house, and they would just, improvise music through the night. And after a few weeks doing this pretty consistently, he came into therapy one day and he said, I don't know if this is a problem for my marriage or not, but I don't want sex anymore. So I said to him, we've been talking about these music sessions that you have with people as musical intercourse. We've been doing that as a joke. It's no joke. You're getting your intimacy needs met through music. So your body doesn't feel like it needs to do that through sex now. It's kind of a gift. Well, that's tapas. And being able to find ways to practice that tapas is one of the aspects of allowing the guru to lead you from inside your mind. When you receive initiation, a drop of that guru mind is placed in your own mind field. And actually, for most of us, that connection is already there, whether we knew it or not, and it's just being strengthened. Our tradition doesn't tend to be a tradition that attracts total beginners. That's part of the reason why, we're not a big famous group of people. That's my conclusion after many years of wondering about this. When that connection is created with the guru mind, the guidance begins to flow from within. And at first, most of us have minds that are too noisy to hear it very well. So, we need to have the experience of living with a guru one way or another. Living with him in actuality, reading the books, doing the practices with a teacher, all that stuff. After a while, though, you begin to hear that voice in your mind. For me, it's a voice that comes without words, but I understand distinctly what's being said. And without a recognizable form, some people hear things in Swami Rama's voice or Swami Veda's voice. That doesn't happen for me. My experience of the inner teacher is very formless. And every once in a while, I'll hear a voice in my right ear in a certain way, a certain presence that tells me that's who it is who's speaking. I think the most striking moment for that came in 1980. I had made up my mind that if I could learn mountaineering, it would help me with the depression that I lived in through my entire 20s. And I had signed up for an expedition in the Cordillera Blanca, the great Andes of South America. I had never been in mountains that big before. And I was totally intimidated as we walked in to establish our base camp. I was completely freaked out, really. People sat around at dinner the first night we were there and told stories about their harrowing adventures mountaineering in these mountains. And I just got more and more anxious. So much so, I went to sleep that night, sort of, and I was up on the toilet all night with this anxiety-induced case of diarrhea, which was pretty unpleasant. Woke up the next morning, and I said to myself at first, well, you don't have to go on this hike we were going to take the next day to walk up to 16,000, to walk up to about 5,000 meters and establish a high camp. You don't have to go up there. You could just stay in the base camp and hike around. That would be so beautiful. And all of a sudden, this voice rose up in my mind, my own fatherly voice, and said, "Are you kidding me? You cashed in your whole retirement savings to come on this expedition, and you're telling me you're just going to stay in the base camp and hike around? No. You pack your bag and you get your butt out on the trail right now." So I packed up my bag and I went off the trail like a mopey kid. And at a certain point along the trail, I turned a corner. There was across the valley a huge peak with a glacier on top that went all the way from the summit to the base. And there was a lake. And every few minutes, icebergs would calve off that glacier into the lake with this huge noise. This happened as I turned the corner. I was shocked by the beauty of it. My mind was shocked open. And all of a sudden, from the depths of my heart, this voice without words said, I am always with you. With this incredible warmth and love. And at that moment, my fear melted away. And the rest of the trip was magic. So beautiful. We did a second ascent of one big peak and made some other climbs. And then later on in the trip, we tried to climb the highest mountain in Peru, Huascaran, about 6,800 meters. And I didn't get all the way to the top, but I did make it to a little beyond 6,000 meters to 20,000 feet. And that was really cool, let me tell you. Wonderful. And I did some mountaineering stuff that I never thought I'd be able to accomplish. I front pointed up an entire 100-meter face of vertical ice. Fantastic. So I really proved to myself that I could do something. It was wonderful. Little did I know how much this was preparation for dealing with the major issues in my life. And having that assurance from inside gave me the courage to take the steps I needed to take. And since then, every so often, that voice comes forward. It's a motherly voice. The voice of the guru in your mind is a motherly voice. It has a loving presence, even when it's angry at you. The way your mother used to get angry at you in your best interest. That's the voice to listen for. And it's a very small voice. It doesn't raise its voice, it doesn't try to be loud. This is even true in Christian tradition. You have the example of the great guru of the Old Testament, Elijah, in the cave, listening to the still small voice of God in his heart. That's the voice. And if you want to read the Bible for yogis, Elijah's your guy in the Old Testament. When Jesus was alive, people used to ask him all the time, "Are you Elijah? Come back to us?" Because the belief in reincarnation was common in biblical times. Whatever the church learned to say about it centuries later, in the ancient world, reincarnation was definitely an idea. So it's there even in our own tradition. The church just mostly chooses not to pay any attention to it, unfortunately. That's the inner guru. That's the guru that leads you deeper into your practice from inside your mind with your mantra, with the refinement of the japa of your mantra. It leads you into deeper and deeper and subtler contact with that force, that energy that is guru. Guru is never really a person. Sometimes a person appears who can channel a fair amount of that energy, and we call them guru. But the actual guru in itself is called, in Sanskrit, Chit Shakti, the power of consciousness. That's the Guru. In Christianity, we call it the Holy Spirit. In Islam and in Judaism, it's called Ruach, the holy breath of God that breathes life into beings. So it's there in all our traditions, one way or another. In South America, they talk about Panchamama. All kinds of different names, you know. Swami Veda used to be fond of saying, God is a mother. And if the baby asks the mother, Mommy, put on the red dress, she puts on the red dress. If the baby says, Mommy, put on the blue dress, she puts on the blue dress. God takes whatever form will be acceptable to us. And gradually that form, over time, over lifetimes, becomes more and more subtle. Same with our practice. You know, we learn at first the mantra as a set of words that we do in our meditation practice. We do our mantra. We sit there with our mala, you know, working on the mantra until it forms a groove in our mind. In the Yoga Sutras, this is referred to by the word vasana. That's a good groove to have. And as that groove deepens, the mantra becomes more and more subtle. At first, it becomes just a feeling and the words begin to disappear. This tends to make people very anxious because they assume, as they watch their meditation, they assume that they're cheating. I used to have this conversation with my mind all the time. Are you cheating? You're just trying to get it over with, blah, 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 blah. You know? But that's not what is happening. The mantra becomes more subtle. It becomes just a feeling. Gradually, it becomes just a pulsation of lighter sound. Gradually, it settles into a bindu. And there is a presence to the mantra that is the same as the presence you felt when you were reciting the words, but it's just the presence that's there. And you let that guide you inwards. So slowly, your experience of the mantra becomes more and more subtle. And that's how every mantra leads you back to Om. Every mantra leads you to the primal sound of what Paramahansa Yogananda called the universal motor. He had such great plain-spoken metaphors for these things. And he called the sound of Om the sound of the cosmic motor, of the universe operating, of the universe continually being emanated and continually being taken back, because these things happen simultaneously. It's not that there's a creation and dissolution in discrete moments of time. Those two things are happening simultaneously all the time. And gradually, you begin to move towards an awareness of that process in your meditation. And in that process, the voice of the Guru and the presence of the Guru in your mind becomes more manifest. Especially as you do the work of emotional purification, clarifying, purifying your mind field, making it stable so that it can sit. Not in the sense of trying to sit still, in other words, making an effort, but just becoming effortlessly still. Naturally still. This happens as you go into your meditation practice. The moment you sit there and start to watch your breath, what happens? It begins to become smoother and longer and more subtle. And if you let that process go on long enough and far enough, eventually your breath will cease naturally. There will occur this yogic phenomenon called kevala kumbhaka, the spontaneous cessation of breath without any anxiety about ever drawing another breath. Why? Because at that point, your concentration has made your breath subtle enough that your mind field can make a direct connection with the prana around you. And it can take that prana into you without requiring breath as a vehicle. That's what kevala kumbhaka is. Some of you have probably already experienced this at some point in your meditation for a few seconds. It's a beautiful thing. As we sit down in our meditation, our physical body begins to surrender its tension. This vigilant tension that it keeps, being always ready for the next emergency. No emergency in meditation. And so your body can just let go all of its tension. And what does it become ultimately? Corpse. It becomes the corpse that it actually is. The word for corpse in Vedanta is sharira. And the word sharira means the thing that rots away. Not a very pleasant concept. But as long as the prana is there in this body, it functions, it does what it needs to do. And when that's done, then the body is done. And the elements of the body return to the elements of nature. And so as your body and mind and breath settle down into meditation, they settle towards a state of stillness and silence that is natural. Doesn't require any effort. Swami Veda used to call this lazy man's yoga. He would joke about it. But that's really the secret of yoga, you know. The most powerful thing in yoga is your breath awareness. That's the most powerful practice. It's what makes every other practice in yoga work. Take the breath awareness away, you know, asanas are just a bunch of calisthenics. Pranayama becomes a bunch of huffing and puffing. When that mindfulness is there, however, this process of gradually becoming more and more subtle continues. And eventually, over time, even over lifetimes, you settle towards silent samadhi. So think of your practice in that way, and think of your relationship with the guru in that way. You know, many of us have had the opportunity to know at least Swami Veda in the body, if not Swami Rama. And so we have that experience that helps us to sort of stay in the practice. But they're gone now in embodied form. Swami Rama said he would never come back in a body again, that he would remain in the subtle world. So he's more available to people. Swami Veda said he'll be back soon. Probably has already been reborn somewhere. And who knows in what form you may find him at some point. But the way that you'll know is that presence. That loving, motherly presence. Somehow you'll feel that. Swami Rama used to encounter disciples from previous lives, and he would say, "Do you not recognize me?" And the people would get really confused and say, "No, I've never met you." And they'd continue to protest, and he'd continue to ask over and over again. And eventually, like my friend Pattabhi Ram in Bangalore, all of a sudden he's protesting and saying, no, no, Swamiji, I say this a million times. I haven't met you before. But his body is crying. His body is weeping because something in the depths of his mind recognizes that presence. That's how you'll know. He won't look like the Swami Veda that we knew. That form is gone forever. So sometimes I tell people, tear up your pictures. Don't get attached to that form. If he comes to you in this life, it's going to be in a different form. And you need to be able to recognize the presence. You need to be able to fall back on the experience of the inner guru to recognize that the outer guru has paid you a visit one more time. So that's my experience of Swami Veda and Swami Rama over many years. I treasured my time with Swami Veda, especially the time later in his life when I could spend long periods of time in his presence at Sadhakram, and I could begin to see some of the siddhi in him that he so carefully hid from us. And he concealed his accomplishment in yoga so that he could be our friend, so that he could have that loving connection that we so treasured in him. If he were to show what a great yogi he was, then people would put him, as Woody Allen used to say, under a pedestal. This is actually why I don't take the final vows of a Swami, because when you put on the orange robes, people change their relationship with you. I don't want that. I want to be people's friend. And that was what was so beautiful to me about Swami Veda in the end. It wasn't, he actually could sit in his meditation and levitate off the ground. I know disciples who have seen this. But he didn't show that to people. He was able to prolong the life of his body by 20 or 25 years over what it should have been. But nobody saw that because he never suffered. He had lots and lots of pain, more pain than most of us could even bear. He had cardiac heart pain every moment of every day for 30 years. Did you ever see him suffer? No. Every once in a while, in the middle of a lecture, he'd come to the edge of his heart stopping, having a cardiac arrest. And he would just say, give me a minute. Sit there in his yoga nidra and restore himself so that he could continue. So I feel privileged to have been able to see some of this and also to appreciate what was important about how carefully he hid that from us. Because he wanted to be our friend. He wanted to be a Kalyana Mitra, a spiritual friend. And in that way, he was an exemplar, an example of what he wanted us to be to each other. Kalyana Mitras. So beautiful. And so fitting with his reverence for the Buddhist notion of the Bodhisattva. The one who postpones his own enlightenment for the love of spreading compassion in the world and easing other beings' suffering. Yes, that was his great gift. It's absolutely marvelous. people would call Swami Veda guru or master. And those of us who saw that happen also remember how he would say, I am no guru. I am no master. I have seen a master. But he was a master. Maybe not so great a master as Swami Rama, but what does that matter to us? He was enough for us, for sure. More than enough. It's overflowing with that sense of loving presence, which is the cream of what meditation can give you. You know, if you want to wonder, is your meditation succeeding? How much do you embody the four Brahma Viharas? How are you a better friend? Are you more friendly, Maitri? Are you more compassionate, Karuna? Are you more joyful, Mudita? And are you more emotionally stable, non-reactive, Upeksha? Those are the real criteria. And that's how to assess yourself, I think. Wish you all a night in the beauty of the Guru's presence. Inside your mind, may you observe your mind and body sleeping